Hello, Tennessean viewers and readers. This is David Plazas, the Opinion and Engagement Director, and I have the pleasure of having Councilmember Burkley Allen on. This is part of a series that we're doing with the candidates for At-Large Metro Council who advanced to the September 14th runoff. Councilmember Allen, how are you doing today?
I'm great and glad to be on the show.
No, so glad for you to be here. Well, tell us a little bit about why you're running for re-election.
I'm running for re-election because it has been just a great ride to serve on the Metro Council, and I've gotten a lot of great things started, and I'm not finished. And I have more work that I want to do that I believe the next term will give me the opportunity to complete those items and just stay engaged in making sure Nashville's growth is good for people, because that's the big question right now is how do we make this growth good?
Yeah, that growth aspect is probably the biggest issue in the campaign right now. And from your experience over the last, because you served as at-large council member, you're currently a member, and you served as a district council member as well. Mm-hmm. What are the things that you've contributed to address this particular issue?
I've spent a lot of time working on housing affordability, which I think is very closely related with that. Just trying to remove obstacles that make it hard to build houses that people can afford to live in. I mean, I want my children to come back and live in Nashville, and it's a real obstacle just finding housing that doesn't, take everything they've got to pay for that. So I've been involved in creating the fund, the Barnes Affordable Housing Fund. I was one of the co-sponsors of that, and also created the first dedicated funding stream for that, getting a penny from the short-term rental taxes to be specifically dedicated to that. We've since, worked on adding more sources of funding, but that one has created more units than anything else. I also was involved in creating some tax breaks for some of the housing projects that MDHA, Metro Development and Housing Authority, works with on using federal money to ensure that those can get built, but there's some obstacles that have been thrown up by the state. And so the city has created a tax incentive that moves those obstacles out of the way. It's crazy. It's got to be that complicated, but sometimes it does. And then finally, I just passed some legislation that creates a new type of overlay where neighborhoods that are interested can apply for a special type of zoning that allows them to build mother-in-law cottages in their backyards as a group. They all agree this is what we want, and we think it will create another type of housing that's great for students or for aging baby boomers, or as a way for someone to earn income from their house that doesn't add a whole lot to density. So there are a lot more tools out there that we need to be emulating from other cities, and I want to continue working on some of those.
If I recall correctly, you chaired the Affordable Housing Task Force that Mayor Cooper had put together a few years ago, which came out with several recommendations. Will you talk a little bit about some of the things that were accomplished and some of the things that have yet to be accomplished?
Yes, I was on that task force. I was not the chair. I was chair of the council's Affordable Housing Committee when it was first formed. But it was a great honor to serve on that task force because it was a gathering of some of the folks that really know the most about this. They had 10 recommendations, and some of those included, again, the Barnes Affordable Housing Fund, to fully fund that at $30 million a year. And we've done that for the past 2 years. To create a catalyst fund that would be able to just sort of jump on opportunities or provide other people with funding to jump on opportunities to either preserve existing housing or create more housing. And also there were recommendations to, there were 10 things that we talked about, to create a housing dashboard, which I had actually called for in previous legislation in an earlier term, but it's just taken having an actual housing now in the planning department to make that happen. So there's now a place that you can go to and see what is the need in Nashville, how short are we on housing, and what's being done about it, what groups are creating housing, and how much happened last year, and where can I go if I'm someone who is working 40 hours a week, making what is, a typical wage, but often is not enough to pay the rent. So there's information on all those things. That was another recommendation that the group had, is just to create that dashboard to do that. So to have good data available to do those types of things. Those things are, and then also just to create that the housing division, to have an actual separate department. And that's been really successful. Having Angie Hubbard an official position with the staff, to be present at every single conversation about Nashville's growth, to ask the question, and what are we going to do to ensure that the people who live and work here can also be able to continue to live here and to stay in their homes. So creating that department has been a really meaningful thing. So there's still more of those things on the list that need to be implemented, but we're doing, I think, a really great job of stepping through them, so that no one can say we have these plans and they're sitting on the shelf. This plan is actually being implemented, which I think is really good.
No, thank you so much for that. And you've seen a lot of growth and change in Nashville in the time that you served on the Metro Council as a district member and also as an at-large member. Would you talk a little bit about just balancing that growth? Because you've seen this rise in short-term rentals, this rise in tourism, record tourism, record flights into record hotel occupancy, and at the same time, people's desire to see neighborhoods, more investments in neighborhoods. How do we find that right balance in Nashville?
Boy, that's such a great question. I mean, I think we're getting some things right, and we're learning on some of the others. I think one important thing that Metro is doing much better now than we used to is traffic calming. So, I mean, one of the things about quality of life in neighborhood is not having people speeding down your streets. And when I first got on the council, the job of what was then Public Works was to ensure that cars could move as quickly and efficiently down streets as possible. And nobody even mentioned the fact that there were pedestrians or children playing in front yards. And now that whole emphasis has shifted significantly to having a really robust traffic calming program that neighborhoods can apply for. And we're moving through, instead of doing maybe 30 a year, we're doing 90 twice a year, where neighborhoods can say, we want something on our street that will slow drivers down. And there's a database process to sort of go through and measure how much traffic there really is, how slow it's or fast it's going down the street, and to prioritize who really has the worst problems. But then once you get on that priority list, then something actually happens. So I think that's something that people are glad to see happening, that is acknowledging the quality of life issues. Another thing that I think is a little less visible is the Nashville Next growth plan, which we all participated in. That may have been right as you arrived in Nashville. I can't remember. We finished it about in 2015, and ultimately decided people are coming to Nashville, and urban sprawl, where we just keep buying farms and turning them into subdivisions, this just increases the traffic, because then everyone has to drive in. Somewhere we've got to find a balance of maintaining our neighborhoods and protecting them while allowing growth to happen on the corridors and in the commercial centers. And that's still not an easy sell. It's still, as we know, often can add to traffic just by allowing more people to be here. But if we can do it in a smart way, where we can put more people on a corridor where they can catch a bus to get to work, or where they can actually walk to work because it's a mixed use project, then the potential is there not to be adding to traffic every time a new person comes to town. So I think the move towards more mixed use, where there are jobs and offices and retail close to each other, has the potential to make that growth work in a way that isn't as impactful on the neighborhoods. It's still an important balance, and I think the community conversation is always important and always makes every project better. I think the changes that happen along the way maybe make the process move a little more slowly than many people would like, but often it makes what we end up getting built on the corridors and in the centers function better for leaving the neighborhoods not as impacted as they would be if we hadn't had that conversation.
Well, thank you for so much for that. Yes, I was brand new in the city when things were getting wrapped up in Nashville Next, and got to read through the report. A lot of time and investment had gone into it, a lot of community listening, and we had talked already about housing. There were also a couple of other issues that people were concerned about, which included transit and public safety. Could you talk about those two aspects in terms of how you see the need to address those factors in Nashville today?
Yeah, absolutely. So transit, I mean, our current, under the current mayor, there was an emphasis put on how do we make our bus system service better, and just also to ensure that our roads are in a good state of repair. So we've had what's been referred to as the Better Bus Plan, which has worked really hard to implement a lot of the things that we heard from people as Espada Massimo held her listening sessions and said, how do we make things work better for you? So the buses now, there are many more buses that run more frequently. So on a 15-minute schedule as opposed to a once an hour schedule. And that's almost like a big city does. So I think that's a huge improvement. A lot of the routes now run later into the night. We've added an additional hour last year and an additional hour this year. So if you work a late shift and you rode the bus to work, now there's a much greater possibility that you can ride that same bus home, that's really key. We've added more crosstown buses so that you don't have to go all the way into downtown and come back out again. And they've also implemented the quick ticket process, which is application based and also card based, that I think will make boarding and everything easier. And there are just more opportunities for combination fares that can make it less expensive to people. So I think we've worked to make the bus system serve people better. There's a transit center now in Hillsborough, built in Green Hills, and another one being built on Clarksville Highway. And I think those will create an opportunity for more interconnections between buses without having to go downtown. The longer picture is, are we eventually ever going to have honest to goodness transit? Will there be light rail that gets people from Murfreesboro into town so that car isn't even on the street anywhere? And I think that's something for the next mayor to take on. And I think that's very much been a conversation, the mayoral debate. So I'm encouraged that we'll do that. I think that's going to require a dedicated source of funding, and that's going to require another public referendum. And we've got to do a better job of ensuring that we have a well thought out plan that will work, and that can also be compatible again with ensuring that growth doesn't push people out of neighborhoods or make it hard for businesses to continue. So I think we're just on the front edge of that part of making transit work better. But I have taken advantage multiple times of WeGo's offer to do free bus training. They'll do a bus ride one-on-one, and I invite neighbors to join me at a bus stop, and we ride downtown to something fun that's happening downtown, and you get sort of free coaching and to hop on the bus. And many people will say, I've never ridden the bus before. Who knew there was Wi-Fi? Or this is really nice and it's so convenient. So I think the more we can expose people who haven't been part of that culture, and also the more people move from other cities, especially the young people that have experienced a good transit system, that come here and expect us to have that, I think that'll help move us forward to having lots and lots of support for both increasing the way our bus system works and also moving towards having a real transit system that'll make the commuters have better options for getting into town, and then having good options to get around once they get here.
Perfect. And on the public safety aspect of it, I know there's been a lot of conversations, be it license plate readers or the perceptions or realities of crime. We've certainly seen the stats over time. I've reported on them. What are the things you're hearing from your constituents about what they want you to address as it comes to feeling safe in Nashville?
Interestingly, one of the big things is related to firearms, which is, pretty much a state issue. So I will just say to people, make sure you communicate at the state level about your thoughts on the special session that's coming up. So getting that out of the way, back to what is local. I think one thing that the police department has done that has been very well received is the mental health diversion additions that they've made. So we've now got the Partners in Care, and also the REACH programs. Partners in Care is where a mental health professional travels around with police. And when there's an issue that clearly is not a crime, but is a problem, and there's a person that is causing a problem, in the past, the only option would be to figure some reason to arrest him for trespassing, and then there's no real solution. Now we've got a mental health professional who can deal with that person and get them the services that they need, and maybe get to the root cause of, why they're in, to quote Sheriff Darren Hall, the naked guy in the park, how we get him to a situation where he's got a better place to hang out and deal with whatever his mental health issues are. So I think that program has taken a lot of things that used to fall under crime and arrest sort of treatment to a much better place. And I think that's a good thing. I think we're working harder on recruiting a police force that looks like people in the different neighborhoods. And that I think goes a long way towards beginning to build some trust and relationships with the people that are doing their best to keep crime out of neighborhoods. Also, just the whole move, Metro is putting a lot of emphasis and funding into violence reduction, which is not a police initiative necessarily. It's really working with nonprofits that are building relationships in neighborhoods, providing alternatives for kids after school to hanging out in gangs. And I think the more we can, ensure that our education system is robust and fantastic for our kids, and then providing great opportunities. Because as you probably know, most crimes are down. Really, the only ones that are up are related to car thefts, and much of that has been connected to young people who don't have much else to do, who are spending their evenings cruising neighborhoods, checking door handles, and looking often for firearms that are stored unsecurely in cars. And we've just kind of gotten to a perfect storm of enabling that to happen. So I think the more we can provide alternatives to kids to find community and purpose in other things, that's a really good investment of our funding, and to continue to look at ways that the police force can, rather than simply reacting to crime after they happen, be part of building the relationships and trying to keep those things from happening in the first place.
Thank you. As we conclude the conversation, I asked all the candidates for office some of the places they'd recommend to tourists, and you had mentioned Edward Warner Park and also Centennial Park. Mm-hmm. Why are those your places to recommend?
Well, I grew up in the country, so hanging out in the woods is my idea of the ultimate way to spend your time. And those, Nashville is lucky to have Beeman. We've got just some fantastic places where you can totally get lost in the woods, and just remember, that we've got this great nature around us. And that's part of the beauty of Metro Nashville, is to be such a big city and have, exciting places like downtown, if that's what appeals to you, but also these wonderful parks that are just a great, calm, peaceful place to be, which I think is also a real gift that we've got that available. And our greenways as well, if you can't be surrounded by, at least to be able to get out and walk and be outside in the sun and the fresh air and enjoy those linear parks, I think is also a great thing that we have and we need to continue to grow.
Councilman Burkley Allen, thank you so much for your time. Any final words for the audience?
I appreciate the opportunity. 20% of people voted in the last election. We need 100% of people who are registered to vote to get out and decide who's going to be running this city. So I encourage everyone to vote on September 14th. Early voting starts the 25th.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. You too, David.